Welcome to Care Vision's Professional Talks, a podcast where we explore the key issues influencing and shaping the lives of children and young people who need extra familial care and support, and what these mean for the professional community responsible for providing this support. I'm Humphrey Hawksley. In each episode, I speak with leading thinkers across social care, social work, education, health, and government to unpack the challenges and opportunities facing practitioners and leaders involved in supporting children and their families. If you're a professional in the sector or simply someone who cares deeply about improving the experiences and outcomes for our children and young people, you're in the right place. Hello and welcome. I'm Humphrey Hawksley. This is Care Vision's Professional Talk and Podcast, where we discuss issues on health and social care that are critical to all our lives. The talk part is about communications, getting a conversation going between professionals and how professionals talk to civilians like myself. Today, we're talking about social pedagogy, and the civilians amongst us might well ask, what is that? And we will find out, because I'm privileged to have as my guest someone with a deep knowledge of children and families, social work and child protection, a wide experience of working with all sorts of communities, from London's poorest inner city areas to the wealthier, leafy suburbs. Welcome, Yvalia Febrer, to Care Vision's Professional Talk.
Thank you so much. I'm really honoured to be here. Thank you so much, Humphrey.
It's great to see you. And before we leap into the issue that we're discussing, I want to talk a bit about you, and because you come up with lots of initiatives around this and ideas and that with social pedagogy. But share with us, please, how you got into this line of work. Was it a vocation, a childhood or teenage experience which swung you around to it, a particular mentor, or something completely different?
Sure, yeah. Well, I'm going to give the truthful answer, which is that initially I wanted to be a teacher when I was at university, and then I was on a very interesting night out, as you are at university, and it was about 4:00 in the morning in a nightclub called Febrer in London, and I had an epiphany that I actually didn't want to be a teacher because it wasn't really about the subject at all. I was doing modern languages. It was really about engaging with young people, and actually the, Russian and Italian or whatever subject it was really just a conduit to do that. So I then started mentoring young people on a pilot project at the time under a previous Labour government. So I worked with teenagers who were very, very bright, had a lot of potential, but were in areas in schools that maybe that potential, the teachers just genuinely didn't have the time to kind of focus on that. So I did that mentoring pilot project, decided I definitely wanted to be a social worker, not a teacher. So completely pivoted my career plan and went straight from my undergraduate degree to a social work master's at Goldsmiths College. And the rest is history. The rest is protection history.
I want a little bit more detail. You're in the Febrer nightclub at 4 a.m. in London. Paint the scene where that road to Damascus epiphany came upon you.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably not the appropriate forum to paint the entire scene, I'll be honest, but all I can say is, when you are dancing and very liberated, you sometimes are able to just see, think through things and see things much more clearly. And I just had this epiphany in a nightclub. And from that moment on, I was wedded to it, and I've never looked back, if I'm being honest. I literally pivoted immediately, did my social work master's degree, went straight into child protection. I'd gone straight from school to my undergraduate degree, went straight from my undergraduate to my master's, straight from my master's, straight into child protection.
And when you went into that, you would have been, early 20s or something like that? Yeah. Did you ever think back? I mean, did you ever come across such a dreadful scene or such a dreadful situation that you thought, no, I don't want to do this? Or did it make you want to do it more?
I think, like a lot of people, there are certain experiences I had in my own childhood that also, I'm sure, contributed to me coming into this work. And that's probably why I was drawn to young people in the first place, even though I kind of initially erroneously thought I wanted to be a teacher. So there's definitely some kind of personal life experiences for sure. And then it was really just, as a subject, it's also super interesting. You learn sociology, psychology, criminology, feminism, radical social work. So there was the kind of personal element, but then there was also just these were subjects that I was interested in, basically, from like a more academic perspective, if you will.
And like half sharing the nightclub, could you half share your childhood experience?
Well, as I'm sure some listeners will remember, Thatcherite Britain was a unique time. It was particularly unique if you were growing up on benefits and not kind of, super wealthy. So yeah, my mom was a single mom with 3 kids. My brother had, well, at the time there was no such diagnosis. And then he was later given a sort of mental health diagnosis about 10 years ago, actually. So we definitely were not in the most privileged kind of living situation in the 80s and kind of early 90s. And also, I think a kind of personal thing that came to fruition much later than that was me, sorry, this is getting super personal, so brace yourselves, was me realizing that I was gay. And as you'll also remember from the 80s and 90s with the HIV/AIDS crisis, there was quite a lot of extremely negative rhetoric around that. So my early childhood was kind of, I guess, colored by those experiences of being on benefits, basically, and, growing up in the closet in the kind of 80s and 90s where, I'm not sure if anyone remembers that advert, but it had like tombstones and very kind of doomsday type music. The HIV/AIDS sort of
I do, yes.
public service announcement that the Conservative government put out at the time. So there were a few other, I guess, environmental things that I experienced at that time that also kind of led me down this path.
Yeah. And presumably, you talk about your brother, you would have known or got to know friends and neighbours and that sort of thing that haven't or didn't pull through as well as you pulled through.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, absolutely.
And that's what, so which gets us, into your work and into the work particularly of social pedagogy, but define it for us. What is it?
Yeah, I've been dreading this question the most, like anyone who is asked to explain what social pedagogy is and come up with a definition. So I'll give the answer that, because I am a social worker, so I'm a registered social worker still to this day. Hopefully by the end of this podcast, they won't renege my registration. But yeah, for me, as a social worker, it is the type of social work that I went into the job for. It's the type of social work that actually works. It's the type of social work that is social, not antisocial, which I think a lot of social work became in the kind of, new public management neoliberal agenda. It's direct, on the floor, getting dirty, doing craft and activities and outdoor stuff with young people. It is all of the kind of fun stuff in the job that you should be doing, but that actually, when I was a social worker, you were actively discouraged from doing. So I was a social worker in that period leading up to where Professor Eileen Munro did a review of child protection and said, oh my gosh, social workers are spending 80 plus % of their time in front of a computer. Like, how has it come to this? And it's so compliance driven and kind of proceduralized. So unfortunately, I was a social worker in that period, but I was very much wanting to do something and sneakily doing something very different. Right. That took a lot of courage, I think, to do that. And
so I was going to ask you this later, but I'm going to ask you now, because when we were talking before the show, you said some of the best practitioners are the ones that bend and break the rules. That was you, was it?
Absolutely. And I'm really hoping I don't lose my registration over this. But yes, the time that I broke the, on paper rules are the times that I did the best social work. So when I, had longer, kind of more long-standing like social work relationships with young people beyond the kind of 6-week cutoff or 12-week cut or whatever it was in that particular team that you were in, driving kids around in a car, picking them up, talking to them, spending real time with them, taking them to McDonald's. It was nothing crazy, to be honest. But at the time, it was things that I was actively told not to do.
Right.
Even just going into home visits with families, don't accept any food from the family. You can't accept a cup of tea. You can't accept gifts from anyone. You have to physically not accept them and push the gift back to them. So yes, I did do lots of things that on paper I was not supposed to do. I did eat food in homes with families. I did drink the tea. I did accept the gifts and said, like, thank you so much. We'll share this around with the tea.
Yeah. And
when you did write me cards, I did send birthday cards to young people after I had worked with them. I did send a condolence letter to a mother whose child tragically died.
That was against the rules?
I was told not to do that, and I was told I could not use the headed paper of the organization.
Is it still against the rules?
Honestly, I don't know, because now I'm in academia, so I'm not actively in, frontline practice anymore. So I'm not in a team to ask that question.
And when you were breaking these rules as a young social worker, was social pedagogy around then? Was it something that people talked about, and how did that mesh in with what you were told to do as a social worker?
So it absolutely was around, but I had not heard of it, which is also interesting. So I was with a colleague I used to work with who trained in Ireland, like Republic of Ireland. So different university, different kind of context. And he was like, all we talked about was social pedagogy in my social work degree. His entire social work degree was radical social work and social pedagogy, whereas I had never heard of it and we were not taught it, or at least I don't remember. And I heard about it by chance years later, but still when I was in practice, when I was a media spokesperson for, at the time, what was the College of Social Work. And they sent us on media training. The media training was excellent. And, when you're, put on a table with some other delegates on the training and you introduce yourselves. There was a German social worker there. She introduced herself. We all said, where we'd qualified, etc. And she mentioned it, and that was the very first time I heard about it. So that would have been around 2010-ish.
Oh, goodness. Not that long ago, 15 years ago, yeah.
Not that long ago. No, not at all. Maybe 2008, sometime around then, but I genuinely had not heard of it before.
Okay. Could I ask our audience, I should have said this earlier, your questions, comments, your challenges to what Yvalia is saying, put them in the chat, and we're going to feed them into the conversation, and which will take us wherever it takes us. But when you heard that, at that thing 15 years ago, it wasn't like being in the nightclub and getting a sort of an epiphany and saying, this is where I must go. What did you do with it?
I mean, that was the moment, when I said, sorry, what's that? I've never heard of that. And when she described her learning, I just thought, oh my God, that is amazing. Like, that is what I came into the job to do. That's why I wanted to be a social worker. That's what I've been secretly doing on the side, even though I'm told not to. And why are we not all doing that? So that was really the genesis of me then learning about it, which now is me teaching it, and which now is me starting courses in it. So yeah, that was it wasn't the same as, like you say, the epiphany in the nightclub.
But how did she?
It was a turning point.
Because you said earlier that you were dreading the question. How did she define it to you that it caught your imagination?
I don't remember exactly how she defined it. I just remember the huge emphasis on relationships and having a genuine relationship with the young person. Whereas the kind of paradigm I was working in was, you're in a local authority, you're an agent of the state, you have professional boundaries, you do not cross, you do not mix personal with professional. It's a kind of dichotomy. And you should, you don't accept anything personally from the families, like, for example, the cup of tea or the food or whatever it is, the gift at the end of 6 months of work or whatever. And also you don't give anything personally. So you don't share any personal details. If they ask you if you're a parent, what do you know? Do you have kids? You don't answer. You don't have to answer. It's not their business whether you have kids or not. I didn't have kids at the time. But, so it really was a kind of binary, you're a professional. Yeah. These are your professional values. You're doing this 9 to 5 or, 9 to 1 a.m. And this is your personal life, and never the twain shall meet, basically, is what the setting that I was in.
But to put my civilian naivety into this, the aspect of a social worker is very deeply to get involved with the person that you're trying to help. particularly if it's a
so, yeah.
vulnerable child. One would think so. So, yeah. but this involved what I'm assuming was not happening at all. And in fact, might not be happening now as far as we know, because you don't know if you can send a condolence letter to somebody. But certainly it's not part of the sort of the job description at the moment.
Not really. I do think when Professor Eileen Munro did that review of child protection, that some things did change for the better, and maybe that started a bit of a sea change, and that started a conversation, and we started doing more systemic social work. So there were things that improved, but I don't think in general they're not doing social pedagogy practice, what I would describe as social pedagogy practice.
So your work in academia, as you describe it now, is to project the social pedagogy, this idea of building a relationship, of having holistic care, of looking after someone and not knocking off at 5 o'clock.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I'll give you another anecdote from practice. What we would do in a frontline child protection team is ask parents to sign written agreements, like actual contracts. So, life's challenging. Families have challenges. Living in poverty is challenging. Experiencing domestic abuse is extremely challenging. What we were doing, and again, remember, you're a social worker, you come into a team, these are norms, this is custom and practice. So you go into a team as a new person and you just do what you're told to do and what everyone else is doing. We would literally ask families to sign written agreements saying, I will not, hit my wife, hit my kids. I will not swear at my kids. Like a list of 15 things that they should not do, sign here and date it. As if that would make that change happen. As if writing it down and signing a piece of paper is going to miraculously create behavior change. So aside from, that's not really building rapport and kind of working alongside a family and getting to know everyone and having those genuine relationships, you're also taking a really strange approach to try and affect behavior change, and actually an approach that we literally know from research does not work. Telling people don't smoke, it gives you cancer, doesn't make them stop smoking. People need a personal motivation, and they need to come to a change on their own terms in their own time. And look, sometimes in their own time isn't in the time frame for a child. I totally get that. Children do have to be removed sometimes. That's just a fact. But telling people, please just stop doing this, sign here, doesn't work. It's really just covering your own arse, excuse my line. It's just arse covering is all it is.
Arse covering. Well, I mean, the box ticking, arse covering, whatever you want to call it. But you have worked in Tower Hamlets, which is one of the poorest inner city places that we've got. Paint for us a picture, of what your day was like when you go into and spotting a vulnerable child, and what you thought you should do with it and what the system said you must do with it.
Firstly, within that borough, there's also some extreme wealth in certain places. That's a large borough. Yeah. And then I worked Hounslow, then I worked for Richmond, and even in Richmond, and I live in this borough, we've got one of the most deprived areas in the country that is a small locality within Richmond Borough. So, and ditto within Tower Hamlets, you've got some significant wealth there. So the first thing I'll say is, there is, as I'm sure listeners know, there's child abuse, there's domestic violence, there's sexual abuse, there's exploitation in every single, it doesn't discriminate, so it's in the same issues are in all areas really, as a kind of big picture context. Obviously there are local issues, and that's absolutely true and correct. But you definitely, what you don't want to do is assume that there's no child abuse in Richmond because people just have too much money and their lives are just too nice to,
that's not the case.
Definitely, yes. I've had some very interesting cases in all boroughs, but certainly, the kind of uniqueness of Tower Hamlets at the time as well, because that is going back to the noughties. I was working in Tower Hamlets in 2007, 2008, and actually
Before you knew what social pedagogy was.
Before I knew what social pedagogy was.
So you go into a house, you have a thing. Just give us of what goes through your mind, what you see, and how it unfolds?
Gosh. Well, it's of a kind of typical, I guess there isn't a kind of exact answer to that, because I guess the whole point of social pedagogy as well is every child genuinely is unique, and every family and the dynamics are different. But there were certain issues in the area at the time. I can't speak for now, but there was an issue with children missing a lot of school, and there was an issue around forced marriage. So that was something I came across more commonly in that borough than I did working in Richmond upon Thames, for example. So there were kind of local issues, and there were local issues when I worked for Hounslow, local issues when I worked for Richmond, and Richmond then merged with Kingston and became a community interest company. So the other thing that happens is, if you're around long enough, places restructure. And, local authorities, local government will do what local government is going to do. And that does impact you, because you're on the ground doing the work. And when certain rules change, whether you're, following those rules or whether you're breaking them, it does have a direct impact. There were certain law changes around housing and Section 17 money, and that would overnight sort of shift how you worked with certain families and what you were able to do for families. When immigration rules change around asylum and young people, that affects practitioners' day-to-day work.
And then you gave us a really good picture there of the changing bureaucracy in a way, and the changing laws, and how that does impact with you. So you walk in one day and you find that some law has changed, but you know that in order to help this person, this vulnerable young person, the laws are irrelevant, are they? And you have to find your way around them? Or
that's
what happens?
Sometimes, laws exist that get in your way, so you work around them, or laws don't exist that you need to exist. And sometimes language is really important, I think. And sometimes there aren't names for things. And when I was working with a kid, two teenagers, one was being sexually exploited, but we didn't have the phrase child sexual exploitation at that time. No one said CSE as an acronym. Obviously, they do now, and they talk about exploitation. But at that time, it just wasn't in the language. There was no framing for it at all. Ditto, the other teenager I was working with at exactly the same time had been groomed by a gang since he was 8 years old. He'd been groomed into criminal exploitation. So, but again, there was no such phrase as county lines at that time. It just wasn't in the parlance at all. And the impact of not having names for things, which means there isn't kind of, you don't get laws made that go through Parliament and policies come down and guidance documents filter through. The impact was real. The kid who I worked with who was in a gang, because the harm he was at risk of was from outside of the family home, the local authority just would not recognize it. They would not let me do anything with this kid. I couldn't take any steps really to make him safe, because I was just told that's a criminal justice issue. Leave that for the police. This is a kind of antisocial behavior thing. This isn't a child protection thing. He's not being abused at home. The mum was great. Dad, et cetera. So because the harm wasn't coming from inside the family, I was not enabled or encouraged to help that young person. And I was saying, this young person is at extreme risk of significant harm. That's what the law says, significant harm. That's the phrase in the Children Act, right? I was like, please let me do something. Like, I'm begging you, because he is going to get stabbed. And he was stabbed while he was on my caseload. Thank God it wasn't fatal, but I literally predicted what would happen. And what's more significant harm than being actually stabbed? Like, explain to me why that wasn't recognized, And it's just because the language wasn't there for it yet, which meant the recognition wasn't there, which meant the kind of legal aspect and the practice policy and procedure also wasn't there, and all the kind of media attention wasn't there. I mean, it came quite quickly as we got into the 2010s. It arrived because it was clearly an issue in lots of places for lots of young people.
And what would you have done with him if you had been allowed to do what you thought should have been done?
Okay, so full disclosure, with him, I actually did do it anyway. So
you broke the rules.
This is not me plugging a book, but I wrote a chapter in a book that David and Yvonne Shemmings edited. And I basically, with the girl I was working with, I did what I was told, and ergo did a terrible job. It haunts me to this day, because I did what my manager told me to do, which was, tell her she needs to stop lying and she needs to do that. And this young person was being severely sexually exploited in the most awful way imaginable. With the boy who was being criminally exploited and who had been groomed by a gang from honestly as young as he could really remember, I got permission from the team manager to just go off and do my thing. So I didn't do it completely, I didn't go completely MIA. But I got agreement from a different manager who was actually the head of the whole team to go ahead and do all of this stuff. I didn't get agreement to make him absolutely safe, as I said to you, and he did suffer harm while he was, while I was working with him. But with him, I got permission to spend a lot of time with him, pick him up when he needed picking up, when he had been, missing for 3-4 days in a row and, came out looking extremely malnourished from living in a crap house and, just lots of gang-related exploitation, basically.
Okay, so you did a bit, but not enough to, and just.
Well, I did everything that I could do as a kind of practitioner on the ground, but in order to get agreement to put him in a secure unit, which is what we were trying to do at the time, that goes to the assistant director. I did not get agreement for that. No.
Yeah,
I did not. I was told this is a criminal justice issue.
This is, for me, this is a fascinating, as I said, the official and what's in the field and what's in the rule book as in a way. But in getting back to the social pedagogy element of that, if I could just say it, if you were putting social pedagogy into that situation that you just described, how much, you said that you broke the rules as much as you could, but how much would that have changed if it was accepted by the bosses up at the top? What would these children be taken out of their home, being put somewhere safe, or what would have happened?
Not necessarily, no. But I think because it would empower people to have genuine relationships with young people, you would then get more. So even though he did suffer harm while I was working with him, the traction we made in terms of his progress was phenomenal. In terms of him kind of realizing the situation he was in and kind of, deprogramming him from the kind of brainwashing of the, the grooming that he'd suffered was phenomenal. Whereas with the girl, I think I saw her once, I did what I was told to do, and I never saw her again, obviously, because she wasn't going to engage with me because I came off like an arsehole, because I met her and I was basically rude. So I never saw her again until the police finally kind of rescued her.
So this is a matter of having enough time to build trust.
Yes, it's time, it's the ability to work beyond the kind of, this is X team and X team only does 6 sessions, or X team only works with people, for this assessment, and then they triage it up and off it goes. It's the ability to work creatively and work in the kind of day-to-day experiences that you can have with young people out on the street or in the community, in the neighborhood. It doesn't all have to be, please attend this office at, they were doing ridiculous things, honestly, for teenagers. Yeah. Come to this appointment at 9 a.m. What teenager is serving an appointment at 9 o'clock in the morning? But then, Humphrey, there would be things like, oh, okay, so if they miss 3 appointments in a row, that's an automatic removal from the service because they DNA'd, did not attend 3 appointments in a row. It's like, cool, because they're 14. They're not getting up for a 9 a.m. appointment. Like, what are you doing? Why don't you just go around to the house and knock on their door? Or why don't you go to the skate park where they hang out? Or,
Is that why you left to join academia?
No, it's actually not. So I left basically because I became a parent. Well, I became a foster carer and a kinship carer. So I have a special guardianship order for my daughter, but biologically speaking, my niece. So I basically became a parent quite quickly.
Okay.
and in a slightly different way to usually. And it just wasn't possible to work full time in frontline practice when you've got to do school drop off and pick up.
Yeah.
And also, she needed me, so I just needed a job that was less intense.
Because I wondered, that's great, because that gets us into the different job. But you mentioned foster. Did you foster her to begin with?
And this, I feel like this might change going forward. But yes, so when you look after a relative, a child from within your extended family, you initially are assessed as a foster carer and approved. So I was assessed and approved as a foster carer, as my ex was. So we were foster carers. And then eventually a final care order was made, and then we had a special guardianship order. So we'll still have it now.
Oh, okay.
So we're special guardians. But I mean, at the moment, mostly the phrase being used to describe that bracket of care is kinship care. And it is getting a bit of attention now in the media, so that's good.
Okay. We have a question from Phil Cody that what are the things that you have decided to put at the centre of your curriculum for teaching residential childcare workers about working with young people? That was exactly the topic. That's why I waited, Phil, till now, that we want to segue into. But answer the question, yeah.
Sure. Okay, so was it what are the things we've put in the centre of the curriculum?
The centre of the curriculum, yeah.
I mean, basically the relationship and looking at the whole context, I'd say, and out of that central kind of the relationship, love in professional practice, genuine relationship and care and empathy and enjoyment and fun with children. That's at the centre. I mean, from that, the detail of the curriculum, there are certain things that are taught that are, I guess, tools that you can use in the moment to kind of bring that to life a bit. So, doing stuff outdoors with kids, for example, with the teenager I worked with in the gang, I used motivational interviewing technique. So I used, open questions, and I started the conversation with him when I first met him of, tell me what's good about it. Like, there's definitely good things about being in a gang, Humphrey. There's loads of good things about it. And no one, like all the clothes, the money, et cetera, the cars.
The belonging.
Yeah, the sense of belonging. See, we've gone straight to attachment. Exactly.
Attachment.
We started with that. So in the curriculum, it's the relationships are at the center. And from that, it's a series of techniques to kind of add to your toolkit to allow you to do that in different scenarios and different moments, and also with the other professionals. Not just the relationships with the young people, it's how to advocate for the young people and for yourself and kind of assert yourself in those, particularly in those big meetings where, let's be honest, the social worker from the local authority thinks they're the most important person in the room. And there's a very clear hierarchy among professionals, and there's a kind of pecking order of who speaks first, who speaks most, who barely gets listened to. And there's a very clear correlation between the people who are invited to speak the least and taken the least seriously and listened to the least are the people who know that child the most.
Is that the families?
Yeah, and also, I wasn't even thinking of that. Oh my God, I should have been. No, I was thinking of, like if you live in a home with a child, you're literally living with the child. Like, obviously, the child. It's a bit like how there was always a kind of a divide between social workers and schools. At least when I was a social worker. Maybe everyone's getting along great now. Yeah. But there was always a lot of beef between schools and social workers. And my view was that teacher, even more so, that TA, the teaching assistant in the classroom, they're with the kid even more hours in the day than the parent is. Like, that teacher sees that kid all the time. I've met this kid once. Like, I'm the social worker. I've done one home visit. Like, as if I know more than this teacher who's taught this kid for the last 3 years. Like, come on. Why are we not listening to teachers more and giving them more kind of professional respect?
So just I want to separate off into two bits now. And please, everybody correct me if my two bits are wrong, but there's children and young people in care homes, and then there's the foster care. These are sort of, they've been taken out of their families and put under the care system. What is the difference between the approach to the foster and the one that's in the care home, or is there?
I mean, approach as in the practice approach?
Well, I mean, I'm getting back to the social pedagogy again element here. Would you, because you've got the carers in the care home and you've got the foster parents in the foster home.
I mean, I think it would be great if those people were working together and being trained together more. That would be great. I would love to see that. I mean, you're basically doing the same job. It's in like you just described, it is a slightly different setting and it's just, et cetera, et cetera. But really you're working therapeutically with kids to show them stability and care and love. That's what you're doing. You're doing the same thing, albeit it's a slightly different arrangement, but children move between them, obviously. So,
absolutely.
A lot of the time children will, from foster care placements, maybe from multiple foster care placements, will then go to, and I have to not use the phrase end up in, because that's a phrase that people use a lot with children's homes, that children end up in children's homes.
Because that's the last...
it gives, it adds to that, last resort. They've ended up there, everything else has been tried. So I really don't like that kind of rhetoric. But in reality, a lot of children move from foster care into residential care. That happens a lot.
And so I wanted to bring, if Danny is with us at the moment from Care Vision, because there's a speciality there, and you've done, bring him in. But before that, you have recently launched a qualification about residential care, and which people can walk away with. Give us your idea of how good or bad is the professionalism within the care industry, and how much does your new diploma help?
Well, I think there's excellent practice within the industry, and in a sense, that's what I'm trying to harness with the course. We've partnered with Lighthouse Pedagogy Trust, who are an excellent organisation who've kind of co-created the course with us. But really, there is excellent practice out there. It's already happening. So it's not that, everything's terrible and, we're kind of coming along and saying, let's do things differently. Not at all. What we're trying to do is galvanize the good practice that is there. But it is annoyingly kind of in pockets, and unfortunately, under the previous government, there has been a lot of profiteering in residential care. It's sort of extreme privatization in cases and extreme profit making. So there are situations where you have homes that are maybe not running according to the values that would, that you would see in social pedagogy, that have a kind of coherent ethical framework for what they're doing, and that, are centering love and compassion, from which they do all their practice, all the, even restraint, et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah.
So, Danny, thanks for being here. Just do you have the Kingston's diploma or a similar thing amongst your carers in the Care Vision homes?
We don't. We're in a bit of a confused situation in relation to the role of residential childcare workers, I think, across the UK, and I think this is a really incredible kind of development that we're talking about at Kingston University. There's an ambivalence. I think there are a number of issues at play in the sense that we're not quite sure what it is. So what do we qualify people for? I think there's a political element to that whereby not being clear about purpose. And I think the purpose always evolves. And I think that's where social pedagogy can really help in terms of adapting practice to meet the complexity of any situation that you're engaged in, including the sort of social, cultural and political situation that we find ourselves in. So we're a bit confused by having an HNC and an SVQ3, which has some value, but it doesn't sort of place you in practice. It doesn't place you in context. It doesn't sort of, expand our kind of ability to respond situationally and contextually to individual needs of families and children, and there's an increasing kind of, in my view, it feels like we're increasingly sort of concerned with the individual pathologies of children rather than the kind of system around children. And I don't think that that's necessarily deliberate. I think it's possibly kind of to do with some of the kind of systemic issues and time pressures and sort of, resource scarcities. So we're really looking for something that actually kind of, like, it supports people in practice to be able to engage in a way that's helpful to children and young people, and builds their confidence.
Yeah. So Yvalia's diploma, that takes it to a sort of level above what you're able to work with now, so everybody knows where they are. Is that right, Yvalia?
Yeah, so the levels are different in each nation. So in England, it's a level 6. But I'm going to say, look, we came up to Scotland and visited Danny and all Danny's colleagues, and we specifically came to Scotland to meet them because they are doing excellent social pedagogy practice. That's literally why we went there. And that has informed the course. It's also some of the course content. So we have filmed lectures from them, because actually in Scotland, the social pedagogy sort of tidal wave is definitely stronger than in England. It's also quite strong in Wales. So in England, there are pockets, really.
Are you leading the way?
Doing better.
Are you the leading light on it? Your university, or
I mean, along with the Institute of Education at UCL, University College London. But yes, and there's up in Lancashire. There's a pocket as well. But yes, in England. There's Lighthouse Pedagogy Trust working with Kingston University. And
that's
there was
just gone
a lot
into
of
the
social
chat.
pedagogy at UCLan, University of Central Lancashire. And there's obviously the IOE, the Institute of Education. And there's not a huge amount else from the academic side, in England at least. In Scotland, I think, like you just said, Danny, it's a bit, the landscape of the actual training qualifications is a bit confused, and maybe, like for us in England, isn't really fit for purpose. But actually what you guys are doing, what Care Visions are doing is great.
So Danny, without you having your license withdrawn, risk that we had with Yvalia, are you breaking the rules, or are you going around the bureaucracy to put in better practices?
Can I just go back to I think it's important to mention the MSc in Advanced Residential Childcare in Scotland. It's really, it's a top drawer qualification. It just has limited kind of, the access to that's limited as it will be at Kingston to some extent, and it's at a master's level, which is quite there's a lot of kind of folksiness about this idea of caring for kids, that it's somehow just something that you intuitively can do. And actually, as a parent, I know that that's not true of my own children, never mind children that have had the kind of experiences of adversity that the kids that we've got, that we look after in residential childcare, and there's lots of great things that happen in our residential services. There's no doubt, and I think we'll always be chasing this. But I think we need to be in the chase. I think it's something that we need to pursue. Whether it's formal qualifications, I think it's much more important that people are in learning and developing and have a kind of clear ethical stance, have and purpose to what they're doing, and we work hard at that. But it needs. It's not just a case of cognition or intellect. It's very much about sort of nurturing character and reflexivity. Supporting resilience, supporting welfare, and it's an ongoing process. So I think this is a really the Kingston University diploma kind of draws a line. It plants a flag really for the professional identity of the sector and the status of the sector, because we're all too often sort of looked down upon by people in other areas like children's services and human services. So I thought, I'm really sort of passionate about that. Do I break the rules? I don't know if I'm the right person to ask, Humphrey. I mean, we try and do the right thing for the right reasons.
I can rephrase it because I'm interested in this professional identity thing. Yvalia, I mean, you establish a professional identity in your mind. Are you now beginning to be able to lead the debate and get the rules changed in the favor of what should be done, whereas in your earlier career, you were fighting it and going around it all the time?
I mean, that's certainly what I'm trying to do. And like Danny just said, we have planted that flag. It is no longer acceptable that these staff are looked down on, that the complex skill they have dealing with daily situations is not recognized. I'm hoping, to be honest, that they will also be paid better one day. You know, why are we not validating the actual skill level and complexity of that work? Why are we not accrediting it? Why do we rely on constant staff turnover, sessional bank staff? You know, you could do one shift somewhere, never go back there, do another shift. You know, we're not giving children the stability that we say we all want to give them. We're not really living up to what we say as a society that we value and think is important. I mean, the director of Lighthouse Pedagogy Trust, Emmanuel, often says, you know, there's a statistic which is 22% of children's homes are running without actually a manager. If in society we had 22% of schools with no head teacher, there would be a national outcry. And yet nobody seems to care that these children's homes are running, you know, maybe focused on profit making, maybe not with a manager there, you know, staff who aren't properly trained. There's a recommendation that staff be 22, but frequently they're only 18. You know, I have students on my courses at Kingston who are 18 years old who are working in children's homes on, you know, picking up shifts here and there. It's not really sustainable as a workforce development plan. It's not. It's also just not acceptable.
No, it's not. Danny, do you recognize that problem?
Yeah, I think there's a wider issue again across the human services, and I think, you know, that it's quite a complex. It's complex in the sense that it does relate to status, it does relate to salary, it does relate to kind of, you know, but this is really, really difficult work, and, you know, to some extent that, you know, what I think Yvalia has talked about in terms of the kind of the technocratic or the bureaucratic system whereby, you know, so much of this is keeping kids at arm's length because there's an avoidance of the pain that they experience, and that kind of has parallels across the different layers of the system as well. And paradoxically, you've got residential workers that need to step towards that pain, you know, there's a bit about support, there's a bit about status, there's a bit about recognition, I think, and of the complexity of the role. And I think, again, sort of, you know, really investing in learning and development in that respect can help. But I think there's a societal issue in the sense that that caring isn't given the value it requires, and it's the value that gives the wider society is so underappreciated, even at a domestic level, in terms of parents that look after their kids, and you've got parents that have both of them have to go to work every day, you know, to survive. So there is just this thing that child rearing's incidental. I don't think it is. I think it's far too important
I agree.
to be that.
And that is the kind of recognizing the complexity, but also dealing with what employers need right now, and the current workforce that we have is literally the reason that we've made it a level 6. So it is equivalent to the third year of an undergraduate degree, but it's not full-time. It's not full-time on campus in a university. You know, it's not a 3-year degree. And you only need GCSE or English or equivalent to get onto it. So although it's level 6, it's accessible just with your GCSE English or equivalent. Yeah. That's the reason that we did that, because we're in the situation we're in. We've got the workforce of 46,000 staff. You know, the Masters in Scotland is absolutely amazing. And Laura Steckley is another one of the people that we came to speak to in Scotland very purposely and consciously. And she also did a nice video lecture for us. But it's a Masters. You know, you can't, you need an undergraduate degree, et cetera, and it's not accessible to everyone, and it's not accessible in the same way. It was something that Lighthouse Pedagogy Trust and ourselves spoke about initially, and, you know, it was a master's initially, then it was an apprenticeship levy, and you can't use that, and all the rules. And so we've ended up with a graduate diploma because that is what works for the sector, for the employers, you know, for the actual staff going on it. it's professionally endorsed by the Social Pedagogy Professional Association. So you get a professional title as well at level 6. So you come out the other end, you are a social pedagogy practitioner. Mm-hmm. Again, that's about giving recognition and credit to what people are doing and giving them a title for it and a language for it. Mm-hmm. Again, back to the point about language, if we don't have a way of framing these things, they're not going to be recognised. No one's going to be talking about them in central government or local government because there's just no name for it. So no one cares.
And is it recognised yet?
It's getting recognised.
But it hasn't got a box to tick.
We had an amazing endorsement from the chief social worker, Isabel Trowler, at our launch event. Absolutely phenomenal.
Right.
I mean, that's really high praise for me personally. I think she's excellent. So I was very happy that endorsement came. And she particularly mentioned social pedagogy, not just the course that Lighthouse Pedagogy Trust and Kingston University have done, but social pedagogy. She was like, it just doesn't seem to go away. Here it is. And maybe this, I feel like this is its moment because it's almost had its moment over the last kind of 20, 30 years. But she's right. It doesn't ever go away because I think a lot of people in the field recognize common sense, good practice that is humane across all human services, not just social work or not just residential care, just generally.
When you were so frustrated, and I'm going to put this question to Danny, is when you were so frustrated all those years back when you were starting out and you were getting blocked by all these different rules that were coming in and going, were your colleagues, did you have water cooler conversations if they had water coolers in those days saying, this is dreadful, I've got to help so-and-so, but I can't and all that? Was everybody of that view?
Not everybody. Some people were kind of in favour of the quite aggressive method of practice of being an agent of the state, almost to the point, I would say, of going into homes with steel cap boots, that kind of really authoritarian approach. So there were social workers like that.
And that was your generation, was it? Or was that the generation above you that were...
That were... On which side do you mean?
And on the side of the people, the authoritarians, say, the disciplinarians.
It was a mix. It was a mix. And the scary thing is you had people come in. Like I say, I worked as a social worker during that period. You had people qualify in that. I think I did. I mean, I qualified in that paradigm already. And I wasn't a social worker in this heyday of the 70s. I wasn't even alive then. I mean, maybe it wasn't a heyday. Maybe this is nostalgia. I don't know. I can't say because I wasn't there. But I am told, reliably or not, that there was a time that social work was community social work and that you did have a cup of tea with a family and that you did get out there and try and do something about, like the no lack of street lighting and the poverty in the neighborhood. And you didn't just, like Danny's saying, pathologize the individual.
Danny, your youth experiences, were you as frustrated as Yvalia?
I don't know that I was. I don't think it was as dramatic. Maybe a creeping awakening, and there was always that sense that you wanted to do something and things could be better. But you kind of naively frame that in terms of the material world, resources, money, kind of, without thinking about the kind of stance that you adopt and the disposition you adopt, and in amongst that you're forming these really lovely relationships with these kids and you can't help but be human with them, and that's what takes you on that journey. And that started to develop ideas about authenticity and this idea. These relationships in residential childcare were incidental. Residential childcare had a kind of purpose that it came with an order and it came with a kind of care plan that was to essentially kind of promote and support an outcome for a young person, but do that in a really deductive, kind of brutal way. They need to go. They need to go to school. They're refusing school. We need to find a way of getting them to school. So you push them hard to go to school, and of course they rebel and they don't do that. So I was blessed with a number of people through my career that kind of had similar ideas and similar perspectives, and it's a relatively small community now in Scotland, and I'm really, really privileged to sort of be quite well connected within that with people that have really meaningful conversations about what is the work and what are the prevailing issues and how do we overcome them. And but it wasn't a road to Damascus moment for me, I think I hope there was something inherently caring about my motivation to do the work was that. But I know that there's lots of good people as well that would really struggle to do a formal qualification that are fantastic at this work. And that's the kind of paradox, isn't it?
That Yvalia is why you're making it. You only have to have GCSEs. You don't have to do a 3-year college course and all the rest of it. Yeah, because you can bring in those people.
You don't need A levels or A level equivalent. You just need GCSE English or equivalent.
Or if somebody came to you, although it's not you, that had no GCSEs but had worked in the industry for 10 or 15 years and was really, really good at their job, would there be exceptions to allow them on the course?
Yeah, you can recognise prior experiential learning. It's called RPEL, RPEL. So yeah, you can do that. And you can also, people can take a quick kind of functional English, skills test to prove,
So anybody can get onto it as long as they've got a record of wanting to do it or good, good. Just to tell me, I just wanted to ask you a quick question because you said growing up in the Thatcher times, and then you talked about the halcyon times, possibly the 70s. But, Thatcher shut down youth clubs and did this, and there's no such thing as society. Is it gradually getting better, or is it, you've got, 56 care homes without bosses? I mean, is it getting worse or is it getting better?
I think it got slightly better after the Monroe Review, at least speaking only for England, because that's where I've practiced. And then I think things got fairly significantly worse. And also we had a pandemic. We've had a lot going on in society. It's not even just about, I don't want to get too political in the last 3 minutes of this, but it's not even just about government. It's also just globally what's been going on. We had a pandemic, we've had economic recessions, one after the other. So there's just a lot of ingrained deprivation and poverty. So I actually think that things definitely got as bad as, if not probably worse than they were if you were poor and growing up in the 80s. I think genuinely.
Oh, really?
COVID and again, like my experience is just living in London. So I can't even really speak for outside of that and other areas of England that large. But the things I was seeing and reading, I reflect that actually I think it was even harder and even worse than if you were poor at that time.
So Danny, do you for vulnerable children, which is basically what we're talking about, Danny, because you see this on the front line every day, getting better or worse?
I'm going to be cryptic here, Humphrey. I think that our services are in parallel with society at large, and if you make the judgment about if things are better or worse now than they were 5, 10, 15 years ago, and you make up your own mind. I think it's different for different people and different groups of people. But, there's. I think the kind of the relationship is with these services are to serve children themselves and to serve wider society, and it's the extent to which the services are supported and valued by society, and the extent is there's a proportional relationship between that and the efficacy of these services.
Yes, and so are there more vulnerable? I mean, I have to say this, Yvalia, they're more vulnerable children now than there were.
The vulnerability, there are the same vulnerabilities, but there are also vulnerabilities now that we didn't have before because of social media, because of the internet, because of AI generation. There are new types of abuse and exploitation now that didn't exist when I was in frontline practice. So some things stay the same, some things change.
Time swing chariot attacks. We have to wind up on that thought, but not quite, because I'm going to come back to you for a second for a final thought. But our next Care Visions professional talk is actually a bit on that topic at 7 p.m. Thursday, November the 27th, with the brilliant Dr. Andrew Thomas, and he's going to be sharing with us what he knows about young, vulnerable male teenagers and children struggling with the challenges of masculinity, what's become known as the manosphere, which is part of the social media thing. So that's going to be fascinating and very thoughtful for us all. Now, before we go, give us a final thought, Yvalia, something to take us away, something to discuss with our...
Put love back into professional practice.
Oh, I love that. Love back into... Danny, is that an agreement or disagreement from you?
A broad agreement. I'm not quite sure with the terminology. I love being a Stoic Scot. It's kind of, yeah.
Broad agreement. Love back into professional practice. Thank you so much, Yvalia, for being, I don't know, your passion and energy is contagious. That's what I got to say. And you've been an absolutely great guest. Thanks, Danny Henderson, for joining us. And thank you all for being here until November the 27th. Stay safe and goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, Danny. Bye.
Bye.
To hear more episodes, discover upcoming discussions, or access free tools and resources, scroll down to the episode description